Good evening, and welcome to the next episode. I'll just wait, see who's online first of all before we head on, and I'll just get this working on here. Okie dokie. Well, it's Persimmon Homes tonight. We're going to be talking about the history of Persimmon and where they've come from. So if you join us on the channel, like we always do every time, give me a hello on the screen, and at least I can see where you come from. So give us a chat's on. So chat's on. I can see Tom's on there. Or give us a let's see who's online. Give us a wave, everybody, just so I know who we got. We got 9 watchers at the moment. Well, 7. Oh, we're going up now. So if you're online, give me a shout. Hello there, Mark. How you doing? Aaron, good to see you. Oh, it's all the regulars. I tell you, it's all the regulars. How are we all anyway? And hi Tom, how you doing from Newcastle? Well guys, what can I say? Hello Kevwin, how are you? Are you okay? Hello Oliver, nice to see you back as well. A few of the shit. Oh yeah, you know Oliver lives in a nice house. Anyway, guys, I've got some really good news for you guys. Yeah, and that is the thing. Why are we doing the Persimmon story? Well, it's a story nonetheless, isn't it? But we've got a story of two halves with this one, haven't we? We've got the story of Persimmon and how Persimmon started, but also we've got the story of Charles Church as well. So we're going to end up having to get them all in on the same conversation. So it's not going to be hard. Hello, Mrs. G. How are you? Lots of new reviews coming. Me and Emma are recording new reviews now. It's going to take a week or two for them to start coming through, but some really good leads coming through. We've got some really great meetings, chats and stuff with some big house builders. So we are doing some new stuff now, and I think you'll be really pleased with the new videos. I'm sure they'll be worth the wait once you've got them. So we are recording. We also have something really good. Hello there, Yui, is that your name? Anyway, generally, let's talk Persimmon. That's what we're here for. Now, a lot of you, let's just quickly run down. What are your thoughts generally on Persimmon homes? So what's your thought of Persimmon homes? How do you guys see them? So come on, get your comments through. How do you see Persimmon homes yourself? Okay, in the market that we've got today. What I'm drinking, I'm on Pepsi today, so you do get a dry throat doing this, I tell you. Got some good news at the end of this as well. So Persimmon Homes. Well, we all know the company, don't we? The UK's largest house builder. So let's have a look. So Kieran says, we've reserved a Persimmon Homes because they were cheaper than anywhere else. Okay, built cheaply, squeezed them in, used the same style as Charles Church, but cheaper than other developers. Persimmon are one of those builders who used to build gorgeous houses 20 years ago. One of the biggest house builders. They've gone very basic. So there you go. There's a bit of a cross section on what people think of Persimmon. So let's just think, this story that I'm about to tell you will really help you understand where Persimmon got. Now you might think to yourself in this story, are they completely stark raving mad, or are they just really clever? Because, you know, it's It's about making money ultimately, isn't it? Okay. So if we're all ready, we'll start the Persimmon story, okay? So let's get me out of the picture there a little bit, okay? So let's first of all, let's look at what we've got here, right? The Persimmon story. So there's your typical Persimmon homes pre-house type, okay? Okay, so that's where we were a long time ago, okay? So let's see where we are. So in 1963, Duncan Davidson, nice name, Duncan Davidson, joined Wimpy. So he joined Wimpy Construction in 1963. And he spent 4 years in the army previous to that. So at the time, Wimpy's were building the Blackwall Tunnel. And so working for Wimpy gave Duncan it kind of gave him the feel for construction, and he worked out quickly that that's what he wanted to actually do, okay? So he then he went on a Wimpy training course which lasted 18 months, and then after that he qualified him to become a project manager, okay? Hang on. Yes, you are in Telford. Actually, I've just been, you can probably see the Telford Ultimate Guide t-shirt there. I've actually just been to Lightmoor, actually, doing a walk. So I do walk, history walks and stuff like that. But I wonder if Lisa Freshman is still at Keepmoat at the paddocks. Anyway, going off at a tangent there. Okay, so he did his training course for 18 months, and then Duncan became a project manager. Then he saw a post advertised for the private housing side of Wimpy, which were actually quite big house builders back in the day. Well, they were anyway. And then he saw the post for the housing side and then applied for it. He was aged 24 by then, so he was actually raw. He was a raw talent. And complete and utterly unskilled. Well, in the manner of speaking, in terms of house building, because Duncan had only worked in construction. Okay, so Duncan formed a company called Rydale Homes in Yorkshire in 1965. Okay, so his first company was called Rydale Homes in Yorkshire, 1965. He started it with £10,000. Which, as we found out from previous house builder histories, that it was basically financed by his mom and his other half, which is his fiancée Sarah, and also a distant cousin also became an investor. Okay, so Rydale grew really well, and it was clear he needed more staff on the team. So one of the first recruits was Tony Fawcett. Now, this is quite funny. So this is how quickly you could rise in the ladder of the Rydale company. Imagine this. Now, they joked about this, like, yeah. So basically, let's have a look. Grew. So the first month, basically, Tony Fawcett was started as a joiner at Rydale. By the second month, he was a senior joiner. By the third month, he was a site agent. By the fourth month, a project manager, and by the fifth month, he was deputy managing director. So he actually did all right. If you're joining us, we are talking about the history of Persimmon Homes, okay? So, well, there you go. So, Tony really became a kind of key figure in the early days of Rydale. So, by 1972, Rydale were building 300 homes a year. So, they decided, basically, to sell it to Comben Homes. Now, Comben were quite a big sort of house building arm. So they thought, well, they made him a good offer. So they offered Comben offered them 600,000 to buy the company, And to be fair, trading had been tough over the last few months, and there is a recession looming as well. So they snapped their hand off, and that was the end of Rydale Homes. They got absorbed into Comben. So they felt that they got a decent offer with that, and basically they both said to themselves, Tony and Duncan said, let's do it again. Let's start another company. So that's what happened, you see. So Persimmon was born actually in 1972. Okay, so everyone wonders what the name Persimmon comes through, and I think that's quite important when we're talking about the history as a house builders of actually where did the names come from? Yeah. Oh, there's somebody there trying to jump the gun, trying to tell me that you're going to actually. Someone just mentioned Ideal Homes. You're wrong. Just wait and listen. You'll see. Okay. So Persimmon Homes was born in 1972. The name was a hard one, so Duncan and Tony looked over various different names for their new company in the solicitor's office, and to be honest with you, nothing really stood out. And then they saw, I think it might have been in the newspaper, there was a horse, and he wasn't just any horse. The horse was actually a Derby winner called Persimmon. So there you go. The new company was called Persimmon, and the company was controlled equally by Duncan and Sarah Davidson. So it was a sort of husband and wife team going on there. So the first sites were started under a subsidiary company called Aztec Homes. But by 1974, Persimmon started building their own sites, okay, under that name. And most of the sites were in and around York, because that's where the company was based. So everyone thinks, well, Duncan must have been quite brave starting a new business in the world's worst recession. But he did it. So the plan was the first plan was to create a regional network, not buying new land, and was to open as many regional offices as possible. So that network started with the opening of Persimmon Homes Anglia in 1976. So they had the backing of the bank, Grey Doors, and they basically with the backers, the kind of financial backers behind some of the early years of Persimmon. So Grey Doors actually had a company on their books which was struggling a little bit because of the recession, and that was actually headed up by ex-Comben man, funny enough, Alf Castleton. And Alf was given the job, and actually he was responsible for the Anglia regional office. Okay, so that was then quickly followed by a Midlands region in 1979, and that was headed up with John White, and that's when he came in. So John White became the chief executive of the company, but actually just basically came in to run the Midlands region. In 1974, the Southwest was established, and by 1980, Persimmon were actually building 300 homes a year. Now, 300 homes a year, it doesn't sound a great deal of amount, but actually so you can imagine all of those different regions of how they were split out, and you actually look at that in a broad sort of spectrum. So with 4 regions in place, by the early 80s, it was clear that Persimmon had big plans, global domination. That's it. So right from the very start, you can tell that the company were planning a big rollout. So let's be economical here. With Duncan wasn't like the most experienced house builder or anything like that, but he just tended to get the best people in the best jobs that did know much about it, which is actually the best thing to do, isn't it, really? So with the 4 regions in place, the domination was happening. In just 5 years, 5 years, Persimmon went from 300 homes a year to 1,000 homes a year. That was epic. And with more new regions started. There was they started Wessex in 1984 and Northeast in 1985. They were opening offices nearly every single year. But long-standing right-hand man Tony Fawcett, he left for Barrett, but joined again. And you see what it was with Tony. Tony went to Barrett, but then he went and started his own company called Sketchmead. And funny enough, Persimmon acquired Sketchmead, and Tony was back in the company as a deputy managing director and a healthy 29% stakeholder in the company. So that was really good. So Tony was back only by acquisition. So I don't know, sometimes you can go away and think you know you can go and do your own thing, you learn, and then sometimes it ends up going a bit tits up and you end up having to come back, don't you? So in March 1985, Persimmon was floated on the stock exchange. More regions followed. So we had Scotland in 1986, the Northwest in 1987, and Thames Valley in 1988. So, you know, Duncan, it's clear that Duncan was very, very particular on who he involved in the company, the men and women that he employed. He made sure he got, I know I've said this before, but he made sure he got the right people into the right jobs, and that was the main thing. So if you can think about that, the amount of regions, not even, you know, if you think about Redrow started went in the year and when it started a Safe East division and then closed it. It was challenging. So they must have had the right attitude here to do this, because it clearly worked. So by 1988, Persimmon smashed the 2,000 units. That's 2,000 houses. And so, wow, I mean, that's pretty damn impressive, really. Yeah, so they smashed that 2,000 units barrier. So that was actually yielding a £33 million profit. So that was early in the decade. So just 10 years ago, they've gone from 1 million profit to £33 million profit. That is staggering, isn't it? Staggering. So what do you think about that then? I mean, where are we with that? So let's have a look at what we could expect back in them days. So the house types. So the early house types we had from Persimmon was stuff like this. The Rydal was a very popular house type. You can see one thing about what made Persimmon homes stand out is all of that brick detail. You could tell a Persimmon home's a mile off with all of the different yellow banding and brickwork and stuff like that. You know, you could tell it. And that was it. It was the staple core, wasn't it? The detailing and the brickwork. So that's what they were kind of building pretty much through. That's what they were building pretty much through the 80s, okay? And then house types, you know, there was lots of other house types that started coming. You can see from these, you can see the house types. So lots of different, they were establishing a really, really solid portfolio of house types, okay? So they done it. So they made that 33 million compared to 1 million that they'd made in previous decades, which is just incredible, really. So what was the next goal? So they wanted, I think it was, I think then they wanted, the next goal I think was going to be into the 90s was they were going to take that 2,000 and double it to 4,000. So they wanted to be completed 4,000 units, okay, into the 90s, and that was their goal. So that 4,000 years and another recession in the early 90s. Okay, so unfortunately, right-hand man Tony Fawcett died suddenly in 1990, age 50. No age, is it? So John White was appointed to chief executive and Duncan became the executive chairman. John White was a different guy altogether because John was a ground-up guy, an ex-bricklayer that used to work with Wilcon. And he joined Persimmon in 1979, so he'd already done 2 decades nearly with Persimmon. So that's what it did. So by then they had 14 operational regions. And these were headed up by 3 regional chairmen. So they split it up quite simply, okay? So the 4 regional chairmen, okay? Okay, the four regional chairmen. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I just, when a message pops up, it kind of distracts me a little bit, which is not a problem. Okay, so the four regional chairmen. Okay, so we had Mike Allen. He joined in 1986. John Miller, he joined in 86 as well. Mike Farley in 83 and David Bryant in 1985. So by 1995 they managed 3,000. So they were trying to get their 4,000 unit goal, but by 95 they only managed to squeeze out 3,600. That's 400 short of their total. I think that's a really, really good effort, isn't it? And considering they were in an awful recession as well, so you know, it would be quite quite an achievement, really. So during 95, this was the time when this range of houses appeared. Okay, so they were building. They had quite I know I've showed you these before, but they had quite a staple range of house types. So you can see that was the 3-bed that they were building, and almost like the Rufford we've got today, really. Okay, so that was the Chatsworth. Now the Chatsworth is a house type now that's actually being used now. Okay, so then we had house types like the Dickens and the Thackeray. You can see one thing that started happening with the Persimmon house types is the wood. So what they had is quite a sort of colonial style entrance into them, with like turned wooden banisters and things like that. They look quite, actually now when you think about it, were a bit of a nightmare, to be honest with you. So there you go. You can start to see some of the Persimmon house types that we know today appearing from this range. Okay, you can start to see where we've come from, you know. But even then, all that timber boarding, etc. All look quite good, didn't it, back in the day? So moving on. So that was it. 95, they nearly made it, but due to the recession, I think that was the problem. They didn't make it because of that particular reason. So then came the chance by Trafalgar House. Now, Trafalgar House was basically a subsidiary of the Hong Kong Land Company. Okay, Hong Kong Land Company, and they had a brand called Ideal Homes, as you can see. Okay, Ideal Homes. Very nice house builder, quite decent, quite a decent house builder in its time, So Ideal Homes, as you can see there on that logo there, let me just get you in there. You can see that it was owned by the Trafalgar House Company. Okay, so Trafalgar House, owned by the Hong Kong Land Company, wanted basically they basically put Ideal Homes up for sale. So Ideal Homes have been going for a long time. Used to be called Ideal Homesteads originally. Really big safe builder. Their head office, I think, was in Whetstone in Leicester. But originally, Ideal Homes bought Broseley Homes, and that came out of that. So Ideal got bigger because of the Broseley Homes acquisition, you see. Okay. So in 1995, Persimmon were invited to make an offer for Ideal Homes Limited. Okay. So the offer was 176 million. Okay, 176 million. That's what it cost to acquire Ideal Homes. So what did Persimmon want with such a big company like that? Okay, well, we're about to find out, aren't we? Okay. I'm just going to stop now before I carry on. Now, have any of you guys got any questions so far about what we've discussed? Okay, about where we are with the position where Persimmon are at the moment. Okay, if there are any questions on the acquisition, okay. Okay, right, we've got a lot of negative comments, haven't we? We've got a lot of negative comments there. Okay, right. If we've got no questions, then we will carry on. Okay. So we're on about the Ideal Homes mergers. So that was completed in February 1996. Now I can remember this because Persimmon Homes were... That's it. Yes, it is. It was the Hatfield. Yes, as you say. I remember the merger because I remember there was an Ideal Homes development in Telford, and actually Ideal Homes had a lot of problem with it. And actually statistically in Telford, it actually was the longest development. They only built 56 houses, but it was actually took the longest in record history of the town, the longest time to build that site. Predominantly they were large detached houses, but having said that, you know. So Ideal, I can remember when Ideal Homes, the merger was taken, they basically took the Ideal Home site in Telford. Then they basically just took the signs down, Persimmon signs went up, and that's it. They marketed the rest of the development, but they didn't end up putting their own house types into it yet. They just finished off what was in planning already. Okay, so basically Ideal at the time were doing 2,644 units. Okay, by 1995, that was going to be the forecast for 95. But the problem is when you delve into the company, you realise that companies like Ideal, they had really high operational margins and a hell of a lot of overheads. So swiftly, Ideal's head office was closed, 6 regional offices completely closed literally overnight, and 200 staff members were looking for new jobs. That's how ruthless they were. But it had to happen. The end of the day, Ideal Homes were running, you know, weren't, you know, they weren't running the company properly. They couldn't have been because they, you know, they got to that point. You know, the staff might be giving it their all, but it was quite. It must have been quite hostile working for Ideal back then, because literally it came in and gone, literally like that. And actually, this is the footprint for Persimmon over the next kind of few years, because literally they would take a company and it'd be gone just like that name, you know. And it's just, and it was only when people like me and you end up having, you know, looking through the history of a company, you know. So that was it. Ideal Homes was gone. So that enabled Persimmon to rebrand a lot of the Ideal Home sites, take their land and diversify and build more houses. So they were doing 6,000 units. Persimmon were absolutely, and loads and loads of sites were turning into that unmistakable green Persimmon name. And a lot of areas such as Telford, you know, Persimmon had only briefly come in and left places like, you know, Telford completely, and the West Midlands and stuff weren't in their remit. So they were quite smooth. So I think with Ideal Homes, it enabled Persimmon to get into areas that they'd never been into before, you know. So, like I said, they were doing 6,000 units, and it must have been a terrible time, you know. But what that enabled Persimmon to become is the fourth largest house builder in the country. Okay, so the next acquisition came, which was the Scottish arm of Lang Homes. So Lang Homes was split up into various different regions, and the Scottish version of it, they were taken over in 1998. Okay. Then the next was Tilbury Douglas Homes, or in our local region, the Midlands region, it was called Douglas Homes. So that happened in February 2000. So we were coming into the millennium, and profits were 100 million. Okay, 100 million by the millennium. So the new structure, the millennium meant a new structure, and this is how it looked. So basically, you had you had two people who basically ran the two, north and south. It was that simple. The south was led by Mike Farley, and Persimmon North was led by John Miller. So each divide will have 10 regional offices. So in theory, there was 3 MDs really. So that would include in Duncan himself. So that was very, very interesting. Very interesting time. So next comes the next acquisition. In November 2000, Bryant and Beezer were planning, as we've discussed previously, Bryant and Beezer were planning a merger of equals. And Persimmon stepped in and stopped it completely in its tracks, and they put a bid in for 612 million, okay, for Beezer. Now so it was, there you go. So basically that was completed in 2001. So with Beezer was actually bigger than Persimmon, only slightly. So they actually took on, so Beezer were actually doing 8,000 homes plus a year, compared to Persimmon's 8,000 a year, compared to Persimmon's 6,000 a year. So you actually buy a company bigger than what you are. Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. But these companies are up for sale, aren't they? That's what we can say. They're up for sale. So Beezer, let's have a look at Beezer. The Snowdon actually became a house type that Persimmon used. So Beezer. You know what? I think the Beezer story is probably the tragic one of all, really, because oh, it's quite sad, really. Because Beezer had such a great range of house types, you know, they've been around for such a long time. So, like Ideal, they took Beezer and did the same cost-cutting exercises. They closed 12 regional offices and basically made 600 people redundant, and cut them from the payroll. They also sold off Beezer Partnership Homes, which was a partnership social housing company. But out of that original 6,000 that 8,000 that Beezer were doing, 1,000 of that were actually partnership homes. They also sold off Beezer's timber frame building company. So, but one thing that happened is Beezer actually had acquired Charles Church previously in a previous merger, and City Developments. So that is quite interesting. What would they have done? Okay, what would they have done? So just going back a little bit, I just want to go back just a little bit. before we go into that. Okay, that's it, right? Okay, before we end up, we're going further into the story, guys. Okay, Beezer did buy Leach. That was part of Beezer's story, that was, okay? So Beezer became, because Leach became on the Beezer logo. So Beezer on the acquisition, but Beezer also bought Charles Church, okay? So we're into the millennium with Persimmon, aren't we? So what we're going to do now is we are going to now take a look at the history of this company, Charles Church, okay? Charles Church. So what do we know Charles Church for? I'll show you what we know Charles Church for building houses like that, okay? Large executive housing, okay? That's what we know Charles Church to be about, okay? Isn't it? So what we're going to do now is we are going to delve into the history of Charles Church. Now, it's not going to take as long as Persimmon because they're not. It's not going to take as long as Persimmon because they're not. They aren't as big as Persimmon, are they? So let's start off, okay, and let's find out about. I think this is a story worth telling, okay. So Charles Church was the son of a farm labourer, okay. He went on to study engineering at Regent Street Polytechnic. He then joined a construction company in 1961, okay. And even by the age of 11, he knew he wanted to work in some sort of construction. But actually, by the age of 11, he actually classed himself as a fairly competent electrician. Okay, so he worked with his dad, who had a brick breeze block making company on his family's land. He then went to work for construction company Turriff and Land, and then learned a little bit about what he was unable to. What he was, you know, it was what he was able to do. Okay, so he got into construction really easy. So then basically what he did then is he decided that he wanted to work and build his own houses and what have you. So he sort of started his own commercial contracting company, and the company was called Burke and Church, and they built their first house in Camberley in Surrey, and this was sold in 1967. He then gradually started building more houses. So finance was always an issue by then, as it is with all house builders, and we've all seen of how they've been financed by family, etc. You know, and then so basically Charles started a joint venture with Martin Grant. Now we all know Martin Grant, that name Martin Grant, don't we? And so he started a joint venture with Martin Grant, who was basically a carpenter by trade, but he had the finances in place to buy 125 plots in 1975 in Lightwater in Surrey. So what I think what Martin Grant enabled them to do is actually to buy some plots. So they've gone straight in at 125 plots in 1975. So that's pretty good. Then a more ambitious 1,000 plots, basically at Merrow Park in Guildford in 1976. So if you guys actually Google Merrow Park, okay, in Guildford, and you will see some of those Charles Church houses, because that's a big estate. They built 1,000 houses on that estate, but you can actually start to see those quintessential Charles Church houses coming out, you know. Okay, so basically this basically enabled Charles Church to have a yearly volume of 400 homes a year. So they're not going to be chasing the big house completions like Persimmon, because they only build smaller properties, bigger houses but smaller properties. You know what I mean, don't you? Smaller sites. Okay, so they were up to 400 plots a year. So the joint venture with Martin Grant was actually phased out, and Martin Grant went on to form his own house building company, Martin Grant Homes, which is quite a popular developer now, and we've actually got one of Martin Grant Holmes' reviews on the Showhomesonline channel. Okay, so he went on. So Charles. So basically, 1972, Charles Church Development was formed, and it was formed with Charles and Susanna. So Charles and Susanna as equal shareholders in the company. Susanna was obviously his wife. So Susanna was very active in the company, and during the 1970s, the company did struggle to turn a profit. So the company's structure was strengthened with the introduction of 3 new directors. So they're getting people in who know what they're doing. So John Duggan was one of them. He was ex-Martin Grant, funny enough. Nicholas King and Clive Harris. So that had enabled the company to be more focused, and the company started growing and started showing a decent profit. But the only problem was they struggled to find land. And down in that neck of the woods, it is very expensive to buy land and to find land and turn a profit as well. But the commercial side of Charles Church Developments enabled them to keep afloat, and these included a new subsidiary called Houston. So they had another offshoot called Houston. I don't think it was a house builder. I think it was generally just a general company. By 1982, Charles Church were actually starting to think, is this actually worth it? You know, and they started, is this a viable business really? Because we seem to be up, we seem to be down. What are we going to do? So they started to look further north for land. So the further north they went, the cheaper the land was. So they started looking at Buckinghamshire and Berkshire. So by 1984, things were improving, and the company felt like they were ready for growth. They opened 2 new regions, a southern region and a Chiltern region. So they fixed their sights on trying to get 500 homes per region each year. Okay, they went on to put in place a really decent land buying team as well. So John Duggan became MD in 1984, but left 1 year later. Well, that weren't great, was it? He didn't last long. He become MD. I wonder why that was. So, you know, Charles really wanted to step back and was sort of, you know, step back. And then the job for MD went to Nicholas King again, who had been the company's finance director since 1998. In 1987, Charles Church Development was finally floated. Okay, and that was done with Charles actually being the chairman and Nick as managing director. Okay, they actually claimed to be the only house builder to introduce the early Elizabethan and Tudor styles into their housing portfolio. I certainly feel that they had a bit of a look about their houses, and you would see Charles Church Developments that had both that Elizabethan theme and the Tudor one working together. A bit similar to what David Wilson did, really. But a staple design up till then and during that was the elegant Brinton Flint style that they actually had on a lot of their developments, and you know, they carried them. I think they're still building them in places now. So Charles Church, now they actually got a guy in who was going to be looking after their land. They had a 16-year supply of land. That was ambitious, wasn't it? With that enabled them to build 10,800 plots. In fact, I was just looking at this. That was actually, so out of those 10,800 plots, only 770 had planning permission. So really, the figure looks really good, but actually getting planning on them, you know. So they then went on to acquire another company called Country Homes in 1998. So they managed to push their profits up to 18.5 million. So looking good. So that was looking good. So that was for 560 plots a year. looking all right now. So it looks like they were flying high. Unfortunately, Charles Church himself actually owned a Spitfire, and he actually oh yes, yeah. So Charles Church, aged only 46, basically lost his life when a Spitfire he was flying crashed and tragically killed him. So he actually got killed in a Spitfire. I don't think he was the last. I don't think he was the first, and he's certainly not the last. And that was it. So, but that year that he died, which was in July 1989, Charles Church, the managed 740 plots. There was a spot, but yes, so they did the 740 plots, but the profits in 88 were 18.5 million, but actually profits in 89 were 15 million. So it was actually down. The profits were down. You know, you're thinking, should you just sack this company off or what? But it seems to be a very turbulent company, up and down, up and down. So in 1990, Susanna became the chief executive. Nick King had resigned after a difference of opinion with Susanna, so they weren't getting on. And in 1995, Charles Church finally returned to profit with 190 plots. And because we've always known that Charles Church has always been a high-end name, hasn't it, for high-end houses. It's all in the, you know, that Charles Church logo, that crest at the top there. And you know, they were always known for building, you know, beautiful houses. Look, you know, like at Great Woodcote Park. So with profits up and down, you know, the good ship Charles Church, the sharks were around the ship, circling around the ship. So it made it very, very attractive for a takeover bid, and I think that high-end name is what people recognised, you know, for what the type of houses they build. Just like David Wilson have got that kind of name about their, you know, their houses. So Centrex, which was the USA's largest house builder, and they owned the UK-based Fairclough Homes, joined Charles Church in 1995 in a bit of a joint venture. Okay, so I think they might have become a majority shareholder or something like that. But a deal was done. But then RBS stepped in and actually bought the whole company. Whoa. So they actually bought the entire company and sold it to Beezer. So they sold Charles Church. Wow. So Beezer actually took over Charles Church, and they paid 36 million for it. And well, you know what happened. We know what happened next, don't we? So we know what happened next. Well, we know what happened with Beezer. So Beezer then bought Persimmon, then bought Beezer. Okay, we know that. So that's how the Charles Church story happened. So that's how we got to that point with Charles Church. Okay, so they have got the high-end name Charles Church. Okay, now question is, what are they going to do with it? What are they going to do with it? Okay, well, what they did with it is got rid of Beezer completely. Okay, and the Charles Church name, they retained it, and they thought, hang on a minute, we can now run this business alongside the company, which is what they actually did. So, you know, we know Charles Church is around today. You know, it was a wise decision. I'll talk about that in a minute, actually. So where do we go from there then? So so basically Persimmon had 30 operational regions, and Persimmon were building, in 2001 they become the Britain's largest house builder with 12,000 plots. Okay, 12,000 plots, the biggest house builder. So profits was 175 million in 2001 and 470 million in 2005. In 5 years, they've gone from 175 to 470 million. Wow, that's impressive, isn't it? So in came the next acquisition. Who was Persimmon going to go for next? Now, up till now, Persimmon's been like a bit of a Pac-Man, hasn't it? You know, boom, 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 just eating up the companies as we've gone along. So the next company to go was Westbury Homes. Okay, so Westbury Homes Group. Okay, now they were a big company. Okay, and I think they were maybe the biggest house builder in the UK. Okay, and so that was basically in 2006 they bought Westbury Homes for 643 million. Okay, and so that was in the top 10. So that Westbury this enabled them to have 16,700 completions a year. That's what it did, and that enabled Persimmon Homes to become the UK's biggest house builder. Okay, and this is the Westbury brand as we know and love. Okay, now what did they do with the Westbury brand? What did they do with Westbury? Well, let's have a look at where Westbury were back in the day. So this is a Persimmon brochure but with Westbury house types. So we can see that Westbury by then had clawed back a lot of their designs and they'd gone for this kind of basic approach with the house building. I think it was called the Renaissance collection, but you can see no porches, complete and utterly stripped back. Okay, the Leicester. I mean, just look at these two here. That one and that one. I'm being honest, Westbury Homes weren't the company they were when they were building houses like this, you know. And what they actually did is they actually took these designs, especially the Leicester, and they decided to integrate them. Persimmon integrated them into a new range. So that stripped back kind of house, which were cheap to build. That's the way forward. So they stripped it all back. Then they decided it's time now to actually release a new range based on that. So Persimmon started with these. Okay. Now we all know these, don't we? We all know them. The Hanbury, the Rufford, the Rosebery, the Hatfield. All of these designs were what they needed. So let's carry on. So after they took Westbury Homes, and bearing in mind Westbury had already previously took Clark Homes, okay, so basically it was Persimmon Homes were the #1 house builder. Do you know the record for the most completions in 1 year was held by Barratt Homes in 1984 with 16,500 500 plots. They've never been able to beat that, I don't think. But wow, that's epic, isn't it? That is epic. So that holds the record for Barrett held the record up till then. And that looks like that. That was in 84 and it's not been beaten all of those years. So basically, going back, so Duncan retired from Persimmon in 2006, with Persimmon actually on the only house builder to make it onto the FT index, okay, the FT 100 index, okay. They went on in 2012 to acquire high-end builder Hill Reed Homes. But you'd be interesting to know that also Persimmon own a lot of other different subsidiaries. So they've got a company called Space 4, which is a timber frame manufacturing company. Now that's quite funny, as they basically make roof sections and stuff like that to help them. It just makes building the houses a lot more efficient and a lot more energy efficient as well, which is really important in houses. So they've got a company called Brickworks as well, so they make concrete bricks. So in 2019, the Brickworks company supplied 50 million bricks to Persimmon. So they're cutting. What Persimmon are doing is they're actually cutting out their supply chain and actually making things more efficient, like a big machine. It's run like a machine, isn't it? They've got a company as well. So they've got a company as well called Tilewits, where they're going to make their own concrete tile. That was hopefully going to be in operation by the end of 2020. They've also got their own broadband company called Fibronest, which is another one. But also they retained the Westbury name, and they started they've got a company called Westbury Partnerships, which basically builds social housing and stuff like that. So that's quite a successful little business going on there as well. So we're looking at Persimmon as a company. So let's see where we're at the moment. Okay, so the company's around about 48 years old. Okay, it's got 31 operational offices. The chairman is Roger Devlin, and the CEO is Dave Jenkinson. Okay. The revenue in 2019 was 3,644.4 million. Okay. Excuse me, I'm just looking back at something. Yes, 6. Just bear with me a second. Just looking back at something. Yes. Sorry, we're not got a million. We're talking billions. So basically, we're talking a lot of money there, aren't we? And that we're a lot of money there. Okay. So we're just talking about the revenue there. Yeah. Okay. So revenue of 3649.4. Okay. Duncan retired in 2006, okay, but remains a president of the company. He owns 20,000 acres of land in Northumberland and lives in what we call Lidburn Tower in I think it's Wooter, okay, and Persimmon provides 4,500 jobs. There you go. Okay, there you go. So let's talk. So that's where Persimmon is at today. That's where we're at today. So let's talk about Persimmon as a whole, as a company, okay? Now I bet out of the people watching, there's 1 or 2 people here that work for Persimmon. They're in this chat room with you. I know they are. Okay, because they wouldn't miss an opportunity like this, okay? Yeah, so I'm going to give you my stance on Persimmon, okay? You know what? When Persimmon first started, and they brought out this range of the range of house types that we've got today, that stripped back kind of house that they build, I didn't get it initially, because I just thought, how can you take over Beezer, Westbury, and not take any of those really good designs and not actually integrate them into your portfolio? But I realised that Westbury, you know, Westbury, you know, they did that. They did strip back the company and do that very thing, you know. And you know, you've got a lot of choice of different house builders. You know, if you want a high-end house, you go, you know, if you want the bells and whistles, you go to other developers, don't you? But what you get with Persimmon is a staple house type range, okay? You know, so let's look at some of the house types, okay? So we've got, this is how the house type hierarchy starts. You've got the 2-bedroom Alnwick, the 3-bedroom Sutton, the 3-bedroom Chester, the 3-bedroom Hanbury, the 3-bedroom Souter, the 3-bedroom Moseley, the 3-bedroom Rufford, the 3-bedroom Chatsworth, the 3-bedroom Hatfield, and the 3-bedroom Clayton. In the 4-bedroom range, you've got the Chedworth, the Leicester, the Rosebery, the Lumley, the Winster, the Corfe, and the Hadley. Okay, they are the staple house types. So in different regions, depending on what council there is, they will demand different house types or different styles or different, yeah. But they are the staple house types that Persimmon like to build on their developments. And obviously in the Persimmon range, we've got the Corfe and Hadley, which are both 5 beds. Okay. The Charles Church one, you've got the Bond, the Knightsbridge, the Mayfair, the Harley, the Holborn, the Marylebone, the Strand, the Regent, the Fenchurch, the Compton, the Oxford, and the Portland. Okay, so they're very upmarket names, aren't they? Knightsbridge, Mayfair, Regent, Oxford, Port. You know, they've got some nice Bond. You know, so they've got quite nice names, haven't they? Really, you know. And it took me a long time to understand the whole Persimmon thing, really. But then I understand now that 50% of what Persimmon build is bought by first-time buyers. Persimmon allow people to actually get on the property ladder, you know. And you know, Instagram is full of excited individuals who have bought Persimmon houses as their first home, you know. And it is quite exciting for them, and I get that. And you know, all right, these houses aren't the most architectural looking houses in the world, but people can afford them. And if they were made that way, then unfortunately people wouldn't be able to afford them, because people can't afford to buy a Redrow, can they? You know, most people, the first time buyers, you know, can't. So that's why we've got this house type range, and it's a very simple house type range. They're all they're doing is keeping it simple, you know. And it's, I suppose, you know, when we're looking at house builder history, we're looking at house types, and a lot of developers have gone back into creating really nice looking houses like Redrow, Bovis, etc. But actually, you know, Persimmon have come a long way as well, because back in the day, you know, they used to, some of their housing developments didn't even have garages. They had parking courts at the back of properties. So now a lot of Persimmon developments have gone back to your own garage, your own driveway for a couple of cars. You know, they have had to learn how to do things. And it is a very, very streamlined company, and it is a machine ultimately. And whether people buy a Persimmon house, lots of people buy Persimmon, don't they? They buy them. Lots of people are happy. Unfortunately, the bigger the company, the more complaints you're going to get. That's just the way it is. And yeah, they've been in hot water before, but people still buy the houses. If people didn't buy Persimmon houses, then no doubt the company would probably go bust. That's what we're talking about. People choose to buy the houses. However many bad experiences there are, oh, you know, Persimmon this, don't buy Persimmon, no, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, there's still thousands and thousands and thousands of happy customers every year that buy Persimmon houses that don't have a problem. And on Persimmon's perspective, I think it's really important that it's important how quick you put something right and don't ignore it, you know, and you give customer service. Once they bought that property, you give them customer service to the end. So now I just briefly want to touch on Charles Church. You know, to me, the Charles Church brand signifies the quality. It signifies executive houses, larger houses. But what seems to have happened is Persimmon tend to have mixed the drinks a little bit, and you start to see house types such as the Rufford and you know, house types like that going and being used in the portfolio range. You know, the trouble is with Persimmon is, you know, they've got a really high turnover, but then with Charles Church, I suppose it's treated like a separate company. They are never going to have the high turnover that you're going to have with Persimmon, mainly because they're building bigger houses and on smaller sites. So, you know, I think they want to get as many properties into that area. And maybe, yeah, if you can charge a little bit more for a Rufford, but I think don't mix the drinks. Let's just keep Charles Church as it was. But what would Charles Church say now if he was alive? What would he say about the direction that Persimmon's going in with Charles Church? We don't know, but I just don't want to see them mixing the drinks and Charles Church just becoming another subsidiary. I mean, I was looking across the Charles Church developments. There isn't anything significant like the likes of Hepburn Chase and some of those amazing developments that Charles Church have done over the years as Persimmon. That, you know, they're capable of doing it. So I'd like to see a few more bigger housing developments. But what I did see is I was looking at that housing development in Guildford, and some of the house types that are used there are actually still being used by Persimmon in the Charles Church brand. So it's quite interesting. So guys, I'm just going to look through your questions quickly. It's as we probably just touched on that. Mark Johnston said, "Why is there a variation of house types?" But you know, why do houses look different in different areas? It is down to what the Pacific Council or the design code for that particular estate requires. So, you know, some might want to go for a contemporary, but still the staple house types are still the same. You know, in terms of house types, any of the old house types that survive today. So you'll actually see one of the house types that survived it is the Leicester. So the Leicester's actually being built. The Leicester's being built by Persimmon. You can see. Let me show you some more. What we've got still to this day. The house types being used. This kind of went into the Rufford in a way. That did there. So that was the Rufford. Okay. And that was as you know, that went into the Hatfield, and then that went into the Rosebery. So you got quite a lot of different designs, but so a lot of the portfolio house types were completely disregarded, weren't they? Yeah, actually, yeah, Hepburn Chase was absolutely completely off. I knew we had some Persimmon people on there. So if we have got some Persimmon people on here, come on, say hello and tell us what you do within the company, okay? Don't forget, we've got a load us people here. We're all friendly. We're not talking about anything negative. We're here talking about the company as at face value. So if you work for Persimmon or you work for Charles Church, come on, show your face. But yeah, Hepburn Chase was an absolute amazing development by Charles Church. It was some of the most stunning houses. And actually, I do have some pictures. I do have some pictures of that site, and we do remember reviewing the show homes. So yeah, so where are the site we're buying? Yeah, hang on, let's just see that. Well, I don't think the Charles Church brand will disappear in 10 to 20 years' time. I think what they'll actually do is I think Charles Church will be developing more houses. I think they will probably go into the smaller homes market like they are now. But, you know, they've really got to kind of push the company a lot more than they are now because there's only a handful of Charles Church sites. And Matthew asks about the McLean story. I would state when we carry on, because we've got half and half with some of the with some of them. So we're in the middle of the Taylor Wimpey story. So part 2 of the Taylor Wimpey story will be telling you the story of the McLean, the tarmac company that owned McLean originally. Oh, Alistair. Well, Alistair, you need your show home reviewing. You know where to come, don't you? Right, guys. Right. Okay. Now, I hope everybody has enjoyed these house builder histories. We'll be going back and we will be looking at all sorts of different developers. So I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've enjoyed going through the history of them, and I appreciate your time. So what I've decided to do is, we're still going to do these, but I actually have now, if everybody gets their phones out now, okay, everybody get your phone out, okay, let me just show you, let me just get over onto the screen, just 1 second, I've got something to show you. Okay, guys, right, let's go over to the screen now, okay? Let's go over to the screen. Okie dokie, right. So what you can see there is on Spotify, it's called Showhomesonline, the podcast, okay? The Showhomesonline, the podcast. Okay, so what we've got here is basically House Builder Histories will be going, House Builder Histories will be going onto the Showhomesonline podcast. Now, I know we did the Red Rose story last week and we haven't finished it, but I've done an extended version on the podcast. So basically, all you've got to do is go onto Spotify and click the Red Rose Home Story Part 1. Okay. So if you have a listen, let me just there we go. Yeah, okay. So the Red Rose story. So I'm going to be uploading podcasts to this channel. You can see it's called Showhomesonline, the Showhomesonline podcast. Okay, so you can get that on Spotify if you just search for Red Rose Homes or Showhomesonline on the podcast. I will put a link in later. You can actually hear an edited version of the Red Rose story. I've completely retold it. It's not the live version. It's a bit more detailed. So that's really, really worth a listen, that Red Rose story. There's a lot of information in there. So that's podcast number 1, okay? So that is the Red Rose story, okay? Okay. That's it. So yeah, get yourselves, everybody's got Spotify, so get yourself on there and get yourself subscribed to our channel, and I'll be doing a lot of different things, house related things on there. Me and Emma will be doing a little bit on there, so subscribe to that podcast, and then every time you load up your Spotify, or you can use any podcast program. I think they're being uploaded as I speak, but great place there to find out about house builders, what they're doing, and it's just something to listen to on the way to work. If you really like houses, you want to find out about your company, we'll be doing a lot more. So the whole thing's narrated by me. Obviously, it's the new Show Homes Online podcast, guys. Anyway, I hope you've had a pleasant hour or so with me, an hour and a quarter, and this will appear as a podcast very, very shortly. Also, the Taylor Wimpey story as well will be. It'll be a completely retold version without any flannel in between it. So I hope you guys enjoy and have a nice evening, and I'll catch up with you soon. Bye.